Hello, everybody. Welcome to Hail Yes, a Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan writer for the Detroit Free Press, joined by Reiner Sabin, our Big Ten insider. And Reiner, we are recording this on Wednesday, October 4th, about 2:30 p.m. It is one of the final warm days of the year. It's about 80 degrees outside. That's why I'm sitting adjacent to this window that you can see. I'm trying to think warm thoughts, and I'm about to head outside when we're done with this. Are you enjoying how do you feel about the turn in the weather, and how are you?
I'm more of a warm weather guy myself, but and I'd enjoy the Michigan summers as much as I can. But yeah, the Michigan winters definitely counterbalance the warm, the sunny feelings that you get during the summer with the gray, cold, miserable 6 months that we have to endure during the fall, late fall, and winter and early spring.
Yes, but for the next 4 to 6 weeks, we get that nice, beautiful, crisp fall, and I do find it tough to enjoy because you know what's next. But Reiner, maybe we should take a page out of Michigan's book, out of Donovan Edwards' book specifically. Be where your feet are and focus on right now. And instead of worrying about the winter, because it is beautiful right now.
I agree. But, here we are indoors talking to each other.
I know. Well, that's because I'm concerned about my signal out there, as it is actually. I still don't know what happened. I think I just moved, as everyone has sort of heard the documenting of this. There was some mowing going on outside or cutting of some sort. I wonder if that is what just cut. Like if the maintenance guy who does it just cut like a cable or something, because my internet cut out. I'm on a hotspot right now. And so the point is I'm concerned here. I was concerned about connection. I guess I'm on a hotspot. I could be anywhere. But that's neither here nor there. And after spending as much time as we just did together in Omaha and Lincoln, Reiner, I now know that's probably maybe above your head pay grade with your iPhone 6. I don't know if you even understood what I was just referring to. Do you?
No, zero understanding of that. No, I mean, my technological knowledge is pretty limited, and I'm not up on the new trends. I don't have a TikTok and don't have InstaFace or any of that stuff.
Yes, there you go, Boomer. No, I had said in our travels that I was going to give you a hard time on this next recording about different things, but I'm sure there are equal things that you would poke fun at me for. So instead, we will just move forward and get to our three thoughts about Michigan as we get to the show. So because there really is a lot to get into. 5 weeks in, we are now in week 6. It is Minnesota week, the battle for the Little Brown Jug, the oldest trophy in college football. Michigan had a big information session about it in the summer and some rehashing this week for everybody. There's not a lot of people who had played this team when Minnesota last played them when Michigan last played Minnesota in 2020. There's a few, but not a ton. So here's what we're going to do. A block, 3 thoughts. Is Michigan somehow at number 2 still flying under the radar? Yes and no. There are some signs. It's thought number 2. It's been hard to assess how good Michigan really is. Is it the bad team? Is it them being dominant? Here we have objectively found one statistic that it does not matter about their competition that has showed why Michigan is very good. And then number 3, Reiner had a great article about Michigan's mentality, not just for this week, but headed into the season and what they have to keep forward, sort of the overarching theme of Jim Harbaugh, sort of the beat of the drum that this program marches to. We'll get into that. And then a break. On the other side, the picks. Up first, hopefully everyone could digest that. Reiner, is Michigan floating, flying, soaring, seeking under the radar somehow Michigan, this big brand, with that undefeated record at number 2 in the country?
Yeah, I don't think the buzz has been quite as strong, and I think there's a lot of factors with that, particularly the Dion effect. I mean, that's affected how Fox, the Big Ten partner, has aired Michigan games. I mean, last week Michigan got pushed off the big noon showcase to a 3:30 game because of Colorado USC, and they have not made it onto big noon. Whereas last year they were such a frequent presence that people thought that Fox was the official television partner of Michigan football. And so, I think there's some truth to that. And the fact is that last week they were running up against the Georgia-Auburn game, and Georgia-Auburn got more viewers, even though both were nationally broadcast. One was on CBS, the other one was on Fox. And it's just because, again, Michigan has not played anybody of real note. I mean, Michigan-Nebraska is a traditional blue blood rivalry game, kind of. Oh, not, I shouldn't say rivalry because it's not a traditional rivalry, but I mean, it's two big name programs with two very passionate fan bases. And yet, again, they got, fewer viewers than obviously Georgia Auburn, which is, also two notable programs. But I would argue that those brands historically have not been quite to the same level as Michigan and Nebraska. So, I think there is some truth to the idea that because of the schedule, the disparity between Michigan and its opponents, that they're not getting as much national attention as you would think for a team that's, with Michigan's brand power and its ranking at number 2.
Well, I do agree with that sentiment in general. I have a little trepidation using the Georgia-Auburn example going against it as evidence of that. Because, I mean, Michigan-Nebraska, that was over by halftime, right? I mean, like, people are not tuning into that. And, like, as the number, I don't know the exact formula of how
that's true. That's a
everyone is going to flip. So context matters a little bit there. But also, I think you made a good point as we were discussing this point before the show. There is a new Big Ten TV contract, and while it is bigger and new partners, I mean, there are streaming services now in play, and ESPN, the worldwide leader, is no longer like the Big Ten's flagship station, or does not carry Michigan games, and so they still ESPN is still the biggest measure of the needle, right? They are the needle mover.
They're the biggest. They're the biggest promotional vehicle for college football, I would argue. And it didn't help that Michigan also ended the season on a brand new streaming platform as it relates to. I mean, Peacock's been around, but not as a college football platform. And so that didn't really help there. And then again, it's just some of the opponents that they played. Whereas all these other teams like Florida State have gotten more buzz because they played LSU, they played Clemson, and then you had Alabama and Texas playing. So Texas is, they're obviously a big brand in the same vein as Michigan, but they've already played that big team. They won, and so there's a lot more buzz about some of their games and their season so far than say Michigan's.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's my point, that was going to be my major thought is. I mean, look at the teams, the names at the top: Georgia, Michigan, Florida State, Texas, Ohio State, Penn State. You could argue, and USC is in there, Oregon is in there. I mean, it is just about like 10 of the top 10 like biggest brand. You know what I mean? There's no these. I mean, it is a year of big name brands. I mean, even Alabama at like 11, right? Like. There is just a ton of names and firepower at the top, and so there's just more. I mean, I don't know. I think there's more mouths to feed. There's more names, and you said it, like the Deion. I mean, the Deion storyline just took up so much of the air in the room early on. But I don't know that Michigan. I mean, like if you heard what Joel Klatt said earlier this week, right, about how he is one of the major college football voices. Yes, he has long been seemed to think very favorably of Michigan. But I mean, he said, I'm paraphrasing here, that Georgia needs to watch out for Michigan, not vice versa, right? Like he thinks that. And so when you got people saying that, it is hard to say that Michigan is truly flying under the radar. However, when you think of Michigan, like how they entered the season, right, as on the short list of national championship favorites, they've done, they weren't clean and crisp early on. They hadn't even given up more than 7 points in a game, right? I mean, they've just dominated. They rank number one in so many categories. I see your point that you would think there might be more national discussion about this team, especially with what they returned.
Right. Well, and the coach they have, I mean, Jim Harbaugh is obviously a well-known guy, but again, Jim Harbaugh's getting pushed down the list, obviously, in part because of Deion Sanders. And again, Fox having the partnership that they do with the Pac-12. So they've kind of leaned into the Deion stuff a little bit more than, say, they would Michigan in the normal year. I think, again, if Deion wasn't there, I don't know if we'd be even having this discussion, because probably Fox would be more present as far as Michigan's concerned. And but I just think it's interesting because you would think that a program of this stature and with their ranking and what their potential is, that they would have more opportunities, I guess, or more exposure than maybe that they had. I do feel for some reason, for a number 2 team, they actually are somewhat under the radar, and there's just not as much buzz as you would think.
Yeah, no, and it's fair. And like sort of one of the main thoughts of why that is because for the under the radar, because they're not playing these big names, and so there's no buzz, and people are sort of waiting for that to happen. And because of that brings us into our second point. People, I guess, maybe have wondered, it's not, is Michigan good? Obviously, Michigan's good, but how good, right? Because how much of a measure can you truly get against these bad teams? Now, Mike Hart today, Wednesday, we met with him, was trying to sell some of the teams on Michigan's schedule, pointing out that UNLV is 4-1. However, I believe East Carolina is 1-4. Nebraska clearly was not impressive. They were 2-2 before Michigan. So, I mean, you can't spin Michigan's schedule as any sort of murderer's row, right? But it does not matter who you are playing in the objective measure that is discipline, that is penalties, where through 5 weeks, Michigan leads the nation. They've committed in the fewest penalty yards. They have committed 91 penalty yards in 5 weeks. They have committed just 13 in total, 13 total penalties. I don't believe any personal fouls. And that was, I mean, just the cherry on top was this last week against Nebraska. I know we touched on it briefly on Monday. No penalties in a whole game. So, I mean, just doesn't matter who you're playing, right? When you're doing that.
Yeah, I mean, they play crisp, and they seem to be rounding into form. I mean, they had the obviously rough game against Bowling Green with the turnovers, and so I think there have been some signs where they've kind of gone a little bit off script from that, from what they typically are, which is a very disciplined team. But again, since Jim Harbaugh's returned, they've looked very, very crisp in how they've operated on all fronts. And so, it's a sign of a good team. It's a sign of a well-coached team, that they're not shooting themselves in the foot. Obviously, the teams that do shoot themselves in the foot generally are the ones that are in dire straits, and Michigan certainly is on the opposite end of that spectrum. I mean, they're a team that's functioning very well. They don't make stupid mistakes generally, and again, the one game, the Bowling Green game, where JJ McCarthy threw the 3 interceptions. I mean, ever since that, he's corrected it seems, and it's not putting them in compromised situations and such. And so it's been a much better and more promising situation for Michigan in these last 2 games.
Yeah, as we suspected with JJ at the time, that certainly proved to be the anomaly, right? Not the trend, not the trend. And also, I mean, this is it's not coincidence, right? That Michigan is this crisp, this uniform, this regimented, this disciplined. It happens through time, with years of the same messaging, with coaching staff continuity, with, high-level coaches who can, NFL teams struggle to get professionals, right, to play this discipline. You know what I mean? Penalties are the penalties at either level. And so, there is something to the buy-in, to the level of it. And also, different teams do different sort of information sessions, but I thought it was unique and informative this past week. Jim Harbaugh was talking about these TTG, Teach the Game sessions that Michigan does every day in spring and summer camp, like preparing for the season, and on Mondays during the year, where basically I think this year it is Grant Newsome, the tight ends coach, who's in charge of the sessions, but he will find different plays, both good and bad, from the college level, from the pro level, and they'll just cut up clips and kind of dissect it. Just little nuancy things about the game that might appear small, but end up being quite large.
Yeah, I mean, situational football is obviously incredibly important. They take care of that through these, teaching sessions, understanding what's good and what isn't. I mean, obviously we saw that in the Chiefs-Jets game where, Patrick Mahomes could have scored, given the ball back to the Jets. They still probably would have won the game if that happened, but the smarter play was to just go down before the goal line, inbounds, and run out the clock so you don't leave any doubt about some freakish comeback. So those are the kind of plays that win you games and also are just smart. And you see other programs that obviously do some of this stuff and are aware of these situations, but some are better at teaching it than others. And I think Michigan's probably in that boat of programs that do a better job of telling the players, what's good and what isn't, and getting that message across.
What did Nick Saban do at Alabama? I mean, obviously, just historical power. And I mean, I feel they have different years. Sometimes they do sort of cross that line, right? But sometimes maybe they get the benefit of the whistle. But like Saban is a good disciplinarian, obviously.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he did that. I mean, but it comes down to the individual. I mean, Damian Harris, I think, the running back now for the Patriots. I mean, he would go down early, instead of going in for the score and such. He knew what was going on, and sometimes there were guys that made stupid plays because that's just their nature, their proclivity, their natural. So sometimes it comes down to the individual, how much they imbibe that information and absorb it and then apply it. So a coach can only do so much. Sometimes it comes down to the actual player themselves to be able to execute it and apply that information.
I mean, that thought circled, starred, bold, asterisk applied to everything, right? Like there is always only so much a coach can do. However, that does not mean let coaches off the hook, right? I guess that's an aside.
Well, yeah, the coaches put the players in usually the players in the best positions to execute. That's what their job is to do. And, by doing these kind of sessions, they're trying to do that. But it's still, at the end of the day, it's up to the player to actually, go out there and carry out the plan too. Sometimes you can see, though, when the coaches don't put the players in the best situations, and then especially if you have a pattern of committing penalties or turnovers or dumb mistakes, like we've seen at another program in state that I won't mention, but and so. Whereas, with Michigan, that's not as much of an issue. And that's the side of a well-coached team.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and you talk about it's at a certain point, it's up to the players to just do it, right? I mean, Jim Harbaugh said, now these sessions are known as TTG. Like they'll be like, all right, guys, TTG, right? Like time to go, not time to go, but it is time to go over to teach the game, right? TTG. Yeah. And he's been doing this for so long. They just have an acronym for it, is what he said. But the point is, he has always done this. And there were years, I think it was 2019, they ranked mid 80s in the country in even in a decent season, right? Like a 10-win type season, or maybe that was their 8-5 year. But still, even as a decent team, there's not always been the perfect buy-in. Since that 2020 season, since that COVID year, it's just been all business for Michigan. And this is part of that. And that's what Jim Harbaugh has talked about this last week when he was talking about just sort of their mentality and trying to defy the laws of gravity, right? Like, and this is one of those instances. And I'm gonna let you take it from here because you're the one who wrote about it. But I mean, Michigan 30-3 in the last 33 games. Clearly, they have bought into that discipline, and now it is just how long can you? What do you say? Keep the balls in the air?
Yeah, keep the balls in the air. Yeah, I think a lot of this season, especially because they don't really play or possibly won't play a ranked opponent until, November 13th, I think it is, against Penn State. It's about competing against themselves and avoiding complacency and not getting too arrogant and not letting some of the human foibles that can enter the discussion, whether it's personal jealousies or other possible emotions that lead to conflict interfere with the mission at hand. And Harbaugh knows that he has his most talented team since he's been at Michigan, his best shot at winning a national title. He doesn't want anything to kind of get in the way of that. And I think that's why he kind of brought up this sobering comment about, the law of gravity and what goes up must come down. And, he's going to try to delay that as much as possible. I thought it was interesting that he said that because, again, his general tone in press conferences is usually very positive. He pumps up the players and generally leans into that idea of trying to, I guess, dole out compliments as much as possible. But here he kind of was giving a warning to the players, hey, we got to stay on task and kind of avoid the big head. He said it's a deep, dark, lonely trap. Yeah. And so it's something that's clearly on his mind and something he's a little bit conscious of at this point where, again, Michigan's coming off a dominating performance that he even said was A+ himself. So they've got to keep, that kind of standard going. And he's pretty attuned to it.
What? And as they always say, right? Like they follow Jim because he's the one who's been through so many football situations. As you said, he is the one who has been that close and gotten to the top and fallen off. These players either had only known the top or had gone from the bottom to the top, right? They've never done the opposite. So that's why you have to stay ahead of it, right? You have to continue to warn and plan and prepare against it. And I thought it was another good point you made just about just sort of the camaraderie within the team. Like there are so many pitfalls on the march to a championship, right? In places things can go wrong. And I think Michigan in a team that was less focused, less player coached, less driven, there was opportunity for fracture just by the nature of how many position battles there were, right? I mean, it's serious business, right? It is very hard to fight for your job and still be truly happy for the guy who wins it or for whoever else is scoring the touchdown. I mean, unless you're Blake or Roman Wilson, right? Like other guys they are the guys who are eating right now. Yet everyone seems to be like the team. I mean, as has long been said around the program, the team. And so, and just like a little evidence of that was I was just standing on the sideline before the game at Nebraska because on a lot of these road trips, at Michigan. We're just in the press box because the sidelines are so crowded, but other programs you are given sideline access. And just coming out of the tunnel, Miles Hinton had a wrap on his knee, or he was going back into the tunnel, and Ladarius Henderson is coming out, and just seeing them dap each other up on the way seems like a little thing, but only one of those guys is starting. Those are by definition. Carson Barnhart is starting on one side, so only one of them can, and yet. It's just a little thing like that. And I mean, the edge battle, line battle, the depth in the running back room, different defensive linemen getting picks, right? And guys not getting just little things. And I think it was a good point to make.
Well, and he said that there's a lot at stake too, especially in the world of NIL. I mean, there's money opportunities now that they didn't bail themselves to players, before 2021. So things have changed dramatically as far as how you keep a locker room cohesive and such. So, again, going back to his days in San Francisco, where, again, things were going really well, for 3 years, his first 3 years, it couldn't have gone better in San Francisco. Then there was this drop off, 8-8, and there was some. Alex Boone I had talked to earlier this week. He was a guard on the team. Actually played at Ohio State. Seems like a big Harbaugh fan. Said that basically there was some infighting, obviously within the organization, whether that was necessarily in the locker room as much as it was between the coaching staff and management. There was friction there. But I mean, Harbaugh was always, he was a taskmaster there. I mean, sometimes he was cracking the whip, to try to get, the guys to not fall into the sense of complacency because they'd been to 3 straight NFC championship games. And it's hard sometimes, as a player, you don't even realize stuff is slipping, and you're not doing the same things you were doing to kind of reach that success. I mean, Nick Saban talked about it. It's a lot easier to get to the top of the mountain than stay on top because complacency is the biggest thing that set in. And he was he talked about that after even Alabama got to the 2018 title game and got blown out by Clemson, kind of saying like the team kind of probably let his foot off the gas. And so that's the hardest thing. I mean, Michigan hasn't reached that point where they've won, so they've got that. They still have the carrot kind of dangling out in front of them. But even when you're, you still have that and you're 30-3, it's hard to kind of keep it at the same standard and not buy into your own hype.
But within the Big Ten, they have, right? And that's the mentality when you go to Minnesota, right? Do you notice, like, I guess no disrespect intended to the Gophers, right? We're not even discussing them hardly at all on this podcast. I mean, we can talk about replacing Mo Ibrahim and Tanner Morgan and Nathan Kaliakmanis now and how he's okay a little bit, but against North Carolina, he wasn't really good. And, like Darius Taylor, their running back from Walled Lake Western, who one of the few games when I was GA for like 6 weeks of high school football last year, I went to like just a couple high school football games. Walled Lake Western was one of them. And he was actually bottled up pretty good that game, but they were saying he was going to Minnesota. They're like, no, this was not the right game. I think they played Davidson, like a Flint area team, and Davidson just bombed them last year, from what I recall. But I mean, Darius Taylor, he was a couple weeks ago. Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week, right? We don't need to get into this because Michigan is so far past Minnesota. I mean, I guess there's a chance I could look like a complete fool. Clip that, just apply it anywhere is necessary. But like I don't think that there's going to be much competition here, which is why, with us having that mentality, Harbaugh certainly needs to make sure his players do not.
Yeah, and I think was what motivated him to say that. I think he pointed out to the media, and all of us wrote how dominating and how they look like CFP contenders after the Nebraska game, and it's coach has to coach. He was inviting praise and saying after the Bowling Green game, they only want to win the game by 1 point, and he was trying to maybe tamp down all the criticism that the team invited at that point. Now he's worried about all the quote unquote rat poison that Saban talks about the media hype and everything entering their heads and such. And so Saban calls it rat poison. Apparently Harbaugh calls it the rat trap, according to Alex Boone. And so it's that's the kind of stuff that Harbaugh needs to be aware of and keep the players kind of focused on the day to day, and that's what Zach Zinner said that they're doing.
It's quarterback mentality, right? Never too high, never too low. You got to and it's coaching mentality. You got to just sort of stay the course. It just feels like, I don't know why I just picture like the analogy of or it's just like a fire, right? And he does not want to let the flame. You just want a good solid flame. You don't want it to go out. And so when it feels like it's going low, he'll pour a little gas on it, or he'll pump some air on it and get it going. But if the blaze is going too much, like maybe douse a little water on, like you don't want to burn this whole house down before. Like we just want a nice warm fire, keep everyone good. Like just keep this thing. I don't know why that's what I pictured, but he's just constantly monitoring that.
Yeah, and it's it's what a good coach does. He has to read the room. And I asked him earlier this week whether he's good at that or the experiences that he's had as a coach. And he's like, yeah. And he was like, yeah, I think I'm pretty good. And he should be. I mean, again, a coach at that level where he has coached in the NFL, has been around professionals, been around college players, has lived it as a player himself. He should be able to kind of read that. And again, Boone said that his player experience is extremely valuable as far as being able to understand the mentality of the players as they're going through a season.
Players love that. This might not feel relevant, but like there's this, I think it's the Pro Bowl last year. There's this viral clip about Max Crosby and Penei Sewell having a conversation, and Penei is talking to Max Crosby. Penei, a tackle on the Lions, Max Crosby, a defensive edge on the Raiders, and they're talking. You can tell they're talking about Dan Campbell, and then Penei is just like, yeah, dude, like. He went through it. He gets it, man. Like he's one of us. And and Max Crosby's like, oh yeah, dope. Like that'd be like I love that sort of thing. And he played at Eastern, so that's that's for a Lions podcast that we still cannot convince Dave Burkett to begin. We should bring Dave on just to see if he should talk Michigan. I miss Dave. I want to. That's how we're going to end the first half of this podcast talking about Dave Burkett. The GOAT. He's and good for. I'm just so happy for him about just the Lions' success, right? And I mean, nobody like I'm happy for the players. I'm happy for all the people in the area and Lions fans. Really, I'm happy for Dave and the people who've had to cover that beat for years. And when everyone else gets to tune out when the Lions are 0-11, Dave doesn't. You know what I mean? And 0-11 is an example. It was just 2 years ago. They were 0-8-1, right? And it was just 3 years ago. Michigan was 2-4. Like things can change pretty quickly in football, and it's just funny.
Which brings us back to the Minnesota game. That was the first game in 2020, and things looked really good with Joe Milton as the quarterback, and everything seemed like it was going to be another good season after that game. And there was a lot of hope then, and then it all came crashing down, which ultimately led to the resurgence that Michigan had to have, and getting the coaching staff, elite coaching staff that he has put together, Harbaugh, in the time since, and that's led to the better discipline and the more buy-in from the players and where we're at right now. And so, in some ways, sometimes you have to go through the bad times to get to the good times.
No doubt. And that's what they all say. But I will never not believe there was something in the air that night in Minneapolis. If I'm not wrong, Jake Moody went 0 for 3 on field goals. So you cannot trust anything that happened that night in 2020. And so it was, will this game look anything like it did the last time they went? I'm headed to Minneapolis in a couple days. It is a night game, Michigan, Minnesota. That will be the first of 4 games we preview when we bring in Andrew Burkle on the other side of the break. Don't go anywhere. This is Hail Yes. All right, everybody, welcome back. And I delayed it long enough. I'm sure there is nobody who is more excited to hop on the mic than Andrew Burkle. What's up, bud?
Dude, my camera doesn't work right now. My work computer camera is broken.
I can hear your smile.
But you can probably hear my smile. I have flipped the script incredibly quickly on you guys. Just a couple weeks ago, I was telling you guys to fade me. So maybe I just am bad at advice because I said, please, everyone fade me. And then I went on a crazy win streak. So I guess I'm just cursed for the viewers right now, or listeners.
Yeah. Well, Andrew is now leading the way in the picks at 9-8-2. He cleaned the board last week.
Perfect 4-0.
4-0. Okay, so then why here does my record say 1-2-2? That's probably just a 2-2. We just got an extra number. In any event, I am now 8-9-2, 1 under. Reiner 7-10-2. Although that is all just within 2 games of one another. And Vegas, as always, all of us sitting right around 500 and them taking that handle every time. I mean, or that hook just cleaning up. This is why Reiner doesn't bet. This is why I lose money when I do. And this is why you take our advice. We covered the Michigan football team, and we had a pretty good read on last week. I mean, we're not gambling experts. I mean, we do our best. I watch a lot of football and do what I can, but 8-9-2, it's hard to beat Vegas, right? And like I'll say, I can do the thing that everyone does. I mean, last week, that Notre Dame Duke game, if you were on Duke, you were on the right side of the number. I mean, your Duke is down or is up by 1. They need to cover 5.5 with 30 seconds left. Not only did Notre Dame is just trying to run to get into field goal range. Estime butts a 30-yarder, and then it's 5 points. All you got to do is stop them on the 2-point conversion, and you still cover. You had any which way to cover. So it's that close, right? And that's how it can go. So in any event, Andrew, back to you.
Speaking of gambling, I think you were minus 500 to bring up that Notre Dame Duke cover. I would have bet my life that you were going to bring that up for sure. So
yeah.
Anyways,
you know me.
I know you too.
We already. I was texting about it. I mean, just sick.
All right,
it may have been the deciding leg of a parlay as well. Who knows?
So a little bit sour for a couple of reasons. Anyways, let's start with the Michigan-Minnesota game, as we always do. Michigan, a 19-point favorite against the Golden Gophers. Tony, we'll start with you since you seem to be running a little hot today. Who you got in this one?
Yeah, I always need to tone it down. I like Michigan for the same reason as last week against Nebraska. Just Minnesota kind of, similar style team and similarly limited. And Michigan is similarly imposing and just better. I mean, Michigan can pass it on them if they want. They can run it on them if they want. I mean, Minnesota is not unlike Nebraska, which will beat itself. Minnesota won't. Like we were talking about the discipline, also top 5 in penalties. And so, not going to lose the field position battle a ton. They have some decent pieces Daniel Jackson is a legit receiver. Corey Kroom, the Western transfer, legit receivers, but Michigan still overmatches them every which way. I definitely like them to cover 19. So give me Michigan.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's one of those things where Michigan, it keeps playing these teams with very limited passing offenses. And I just think it favors a defense that can kind of focus on one aspect and shut it down. And in this case, it's the running game. And if they shut down the running game, then they really don't have any chance here. And so I think Michigan scores plenty to be able to cover, essentially. And so, I just don't see much hope for Minnesota being able to put up much of a fight in this game. It's the Big Ten. It's kind of what it was last year in the same situation. Michigan was playing a lot of limited offenses too, and they were taking care of business then. And I think that this team is kind of building, and they've kind of, with Jim Harbaugh back, it's become a much stronger team in all phases. And so I think, that'll continue this weekend against or at Minnesota, I should say.
Very true. I think like what you said, with maybe the exception of the Bowling Green game, it seems like they've been getting better every single week. Last week, Michigan it was like two teams from different levels. It was like, Michigan completely decimated Nebraska. 17-point favorites against Nebraska. A little transitive property here. Minnesota barely beat Nebraska at home because the Cornhuskers did Nebraska-type things and literally gave the game away. Michigan always favors really well against teams who have a similar style, a run-first style especially. They take away the run and say, hey, you can beat us with the pass. And the quarterbacks in the Big Ten right now, at least the ones Michigan's faced so far, simply have not been able to do it. So the 19 points here really doesn't even scare me that much. And I would take Michigan with the 19 there. Yeah, honestly, it would have to be around 20, 24, 25 for me to even consider taking Minnesota in this one. Because I think that if they win, they're going to kill them.
I was gonna say 24 still wouldn't do it for me.
Yeah, 27 and a half.
27 and a half. That's where I would be like, oh, that's okay. 27,
yeah, then you're worried about
that's a lot.
A backdoor cover.
Yeah, the athleticism differential is the biggest thing I noticed with Michigan and Nebraska, and I think it would be the same with Michigan and Minnesota. I just think overall, the athleticism is just going to take over for Michigan in this game.
All right, let's go to the game of the week. No doubt, Texas and Oklahoma. Reiner, who you got in this one? 6.5 point favorites. The Longhorns are here. So who are you taking in this one?
Well, last year, if everybody recalls, Oklahoma lost 49-0. A lot of people were questioning Brent Venables at the time, whether he was the right coach, given such a bad loss in a rivalry game like that one. It's one of the best rivalries in the entire sport. But the defense has started to come around. They're kind of moved away from the Alex Grinch, Lincoln Riley duopoly there, and so and now it's becoming more Venables' team, and they're ranked 4th in scoring defense. So I don't know. I think Oklahoma's going to put up a pretty good fight against Texas and create some problems for Sarkisian's offense. So I'm taking Oklahoma here.
I mean, certainly the rivalry aspect of it scares you. And it's not just that, right? Like Oklahoma is not just some pesky, like punchy team, right? I mean, they've got an experienced quarterback. They're putting up points in bunches. Venable. I mean, what'd you say? Their defense is 4th or something?
Yeah,
I mean,
scoring defense. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Like, they're putting up, like, they're doing it on both sides of the ball. And I mean, also like Clemson sort of falling off a little bit, right? Like, it's not just a coincidence, like, I mean, a lot of those principles and bringing over some of the staff and it's Oklahoma's benefit, Clemson's detriment. That said, Texas, in my emails and the comments on things I mean, people are very upset that I think I have Texas like 4 right now instead of 2 because Texas has been talk about teams that have been bombing people. I mean, Texas has looked extremely impressive. I don't know what more that Texas could possibly do, have done thus far. And this is another big test for a big statement. And I mean, you win this game, even I think Texas can absorb a loss and still have a very legitimate argument depending on how other things shake out at a college football playoff spot. So I do think Texas covers by half point, Texas by 7.
You look at Texas's schedule. This is the game, right? This is the one that they have to kind of get through here. They got through Alabama, and then it's Oklahoma, and so everything's gonna be on the line here. With that said, I've been very impressed with Oklahoma. Like Reiner mentioned, Brent Venables last year gets just destroyed, 49-0 last year to Texas. It's looking bad. And that's the kind of loss that really, you're like, how does this even happen? But what you guys both mentioned their defense, but their offense has been really solid too. They're actually scoring 47.4 points per game. That's 3rd in the nation. They did have a blowout game early in the year, but Andrew Anthony, former Michigan receiver, looked really good. He had just 1 catch last week, but he leads the team in receiving yards. Their offense is really, they've turned that around completely as well.
Levy's a good offensive coordinator too. I mean, it's interesting because I think Venables has kind of brought back OU to kind of what maybe it was under Stoops right before Lincoln. Riley kind of brought them way too far off. I mean, the imbalance between the offense and defense was so stark by the time Riley left, and now Venables is kind of creating more of that balance that you saw with Stoops.
Yeah, no doubt. Sorry, Tony. It's like they have that defense first mentality paired with an offense that's capable of scoring points still. So I'm jumping on that 6.5 points. But Tony, go ahead.
Right. I was just going to say the only part that scares me is Oklahoma's offense has been it's been inconsistent, right? Like they put up 50 last week. They put up a 73 early on, but just I think 28 against SMU, 20 against Cincinnati. So, I mean, Texas is also a good defense. And so, yeah, you could score again. I mean, maybe that I worry there's some Michigan 2018, 2017, right? Like you bomb everybody you should, but then when you get against other teams at your level, I don't know if Oklahoma's quite there yet.
That Cincinnati game was weird though, because I left that game feeling almost more confident in Oklahoma because it felt like they were playing like old school, a very defense first football. And they were just squeezing the life out of Cincinnati and just 20-6 in that one on the road. Kind of a tough spot there early season at Cincinnati, and they completely dominated those. So I thought their defense was super impressive in that game. Let's move on to
you caught more of it than we did. I know that much.
Yeah, that's the benefit of being an editor. You get to sit on the couch on Saturday and have the 3 TVs going at one time. So that's one of the benefits for sure. Let's take a look at Maryland, Ohio State. The Buckeyes, 20-point favorites. Tony, we started with the last one. Go to you here.
Just sort of almost on principle. Maryland, I just put them at the bottom of my rankings, 25th. Mike Moxley, I'll finish that first thought. On principle, 20 points is too many. Then let's get back to the rest of the point. Mike Moxley, when we were in Indianapolis this summer, said the sentence Big Ten championship. And I'm not gonna lie, I rolled my eyes. But he said, we've never said that around here before. We've always had goals, objectives, like the next level we're talking to. He said, we're talking about winning real things, competing and beating with Michigan, there we go, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. And if you remember, even last year against Michigan, that was Michigan's maybe toughest game in the Big Ten. One of, at least by the scoreboard, it was like 34-27. And Maryland spotted them a touchdown with a fumble on the opening kickoff. Now, obviously, it's a slightly different team this year, but Talia Tagovailoa is still probably the second best downfield passing quarterback behind J.J. McCarthy in the Big Ten, and he still has big receivers on the outside. I don't know about winning at all, but 20 points feels like an awful lot. So I'm gonna take the better part of 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this game could be closer. Ohio State hasn't dominated. They didn't dominate Notre Dame, and it took them a while to get going offensively before they kind of hit their stride against Western Kentucky. Of course, then they played Notre Dame and didn't look nearly as impressive from an offensive standpoint. So I don't know where they stand really there. I still have some question marks about Kyle McCord and the offense in general. Their commitment to running the football hasn't really been there, and it's been kind of a trending away from what Urban Meyer did. And so whereas Maryland, I think, again, they've looked pretty strong offensively. They're averaging more points per game than actually Ohio State right now. And I just don't see how Ohio State beats them by 20 points. That would be, you'd have to have a major regression offensively from Maryland. And maybe Jim Knowles will come up with a scheme that confuses Talia Tagovailoa and Loxley and Gaddis. Josh Gaddis is offensive coordinator, the former Michigan coordinator. But I just don't see it. I don't see how Ohio State is, Ohio State is favored by 20 in this game. It's maybe Vegas sees something I don't.
I think college football, you have to operate under different rule sets than just week to week. You have to take into consideration momentum. You have to take into consideration newfound rallying cries, and I think this whole silly thing with Lou Holtz, Ryan Day is using that to fire up his team. You guys spent a lot of time talking about how Jim Harbaugh has kind of a beat on his team and, knows when to be hard on him and when not. And I know Nick Saban, I've heard a lot of people talk about how he's an expert at that as well. If the team's low on confidence, he hypes them up. If they need a boost, he knows when to bring them down. And I think Ryan Day is really using this whole Notre Dame thing, and Michigan and Ohio State is soft and you guys aren't as tough as Michigan now. I think he's really using this. You have another week of hearing that after you go out and have one of the best wins you've had in a long time on the road at Notre Dame. Now you have Maryland at home with the whole extra week, the bye week to prepare for Talia. And I think Ohio State's. I don't see a risk of them losing this game. And so the 20 points does scare me a little bit, but it's college football. There's backdoor covers, weird things happen. And if you're taking Ohio State, I just think they're the better team. And I don't think there's a risk of losing. So I'm taking the Buckeyes in this one.
Yeah, the bye week it cuts both ways for me, right? You're resting, you're healthier, but it's just a little extra. They definitely, normally it's a 24-hour rule, like to celebrate a big win. A big win like that before a bye, you got a 48-72 hour rule, right? You might, I don't know what's going on, but it's easy to just sort of, maybe sleepwalk through that first quarter, right? And then you wake up at 7-7, and and it's like, and then you get going. But like maybe there's not enough time. It's just a lot of points. So, but I hear you. And I think that's a great point about what that win at Notre Dame did for Ohio State. For real.
It just those things time and time again, we see it matter. We just see it
so much in college football than more than anything, right?
Yeah. Or like, I know that I listen to a lot of NBA podcasts, and this one, Ryan Russillo was doing a thing about how every single NBA player's campaign, like national campaign, their Adidas, their Nike, their Jordan campaigns, all were related to how no one believed in them and how like they were doubted this entire way and they're haters, right? Like that's a real thing. And that is fuel that people actually use. And that's how you get to a place like this, is by tricking yourself into thinking that no one believes in you when you're a 6'2", 230-pound running back who bulldozes every single high school player they've ever played. Like that's how these guys, you have to trick yourself into it,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's take a look at the last game here. This one should be interesting. Kentucky and Georgia, the Bulldogs, a 14.5-point favorite. Reiner, this is SEC territory, so we'll start with you. Who do you got in this one?
I've got Kentucky. I think that this could be a dogfight, no pun intended, but second highest yards per carry average from a running game that Kentucky has, going against a Georgia run defense that hasn't been as strong, giving up almost 4 yards an attempt. This isn't the same Kirby Smart defense we've seen in the last 2 years when they won the national championship. I think Kentucky is a very strong team this year overall, and Mark Stoops has done a really good job with that program. And who knows? I mean, not only am I taking Kentucky, I mean, I think that they might have a shot at winning this game based on the performance that Georgia had against a really an Auburn team in transition under Hugh Freeze in his first year. They barely pulled that game out, and I think Kentucky is much more formidable than Auburn.
And to add to it, earlier this year, I mean, South Carolina is no good, and they were losing to the Gamecocks by 10 at the half, right? I mean, that was not just necessarily some one-off thing. I mean, there's been a couple of times Georgia's looked questionable. And that Kentucky running game, if you don't know the name Ray Davis, that bowling ball of a human who is, I mean, he's really a lot like, I guess bowling ball is maybe a little bit of a bad connotation, but I mean, he is just short and stocky and just rolls through people. I mean, he's like 5'10", 220. He's built like Mike Hart was back in the day and just keeps those legs moving. And last week against Florida, he ran for like 250 or 280, and 3 touchdowns. I mean, he's a beast. And with these shorter games, when you can control the clock and control tempo, I mean, that's a big recipe for success. Now, I mean, Kentucky needs Devin Leary, their quarterback, taking over for Will Levis, just to not turn the ball over, right? 5 interceptions. That's not ideal. I mean, so just hold on to it. And if you can make sure you don't lose the turnover battle, then I'm with you, Reiner. I think Kentucky can. It wouldn't surprise me at all if I look up at halftime and Kentucky's has a lead.
Yeah, I mean, Kentucky's like a poor man's Georgia, except this time they might actually be, similar to Georgia if they can do some of the things right. I mean, they want to control both lines of scrimmage. Mark Stoops is that kind of coach, and so I mean, in the same way that Kirby Smart does, I think Kentucky, in that sense, could pose a fight with Georgia, especially because Georgia's not nearly as strong, I don't think, as the previous 2 years. And I also think that, again, if they play a clean game, this thing could go down to the wire, and Kentucky could possibly win it.
Totally agree with you guys. This Georgia team sort of reminds me of like a less buzzworthy version of the Florida State team back in 2014. And by buzzworthy, I mean the team that Jameis Winston was on. He got suspended, and everyone was talking about that team every week. They were coming off the national title. Mm-hmm. Every game, it felt like they were pulling out some kind of crazy win, and they were ranked number 1. But you watched them, and you're like, there's just something not right with this team. I mean, Carson Beck was 23 for 33, 313 yards. Peyton Thorne was 10 of 19 for 82 yards. And yet it came down to that very last end of the game, and the Bulldogs barely pulled out a win. I mean, Kentucky is a lot better than Auburn, and maybe that's not exactly how this game is going to go. It won't be the exact same thing. Teams play bad games sometimes, but this Georgia team just doesn't seem to be like the other Georgia teams. Of course, there's such a small sample size in college football. You have to take teams based on what they've been in the past. What you can't just suddenly say Georgia shouldn't even be in the top 25 just because of what the recruits they have, what they've done in the past year. You have to take some past knowledge there, but based on purely what we've seen this year, and we're getting near the halfway mark here in college football, we've seen that Georgia just isn't what they were last year. So I'm going to take the 12.5 points from Kentucky to at least cover the spread. And like you guys said, if some craziness happens, and with the difference in the player profiles that Kentucky and Georgia have, you do need some things to go your way. But I think Kentucky could pull this one out as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said it about like needing the background, just having to rank the teams, having to rank the teams before. It's why, and I wrote it this week. Like I get that we're all well aware Georgia does not look how it looked last year. However, Georgia is one of the few teams, at least for me, I mean, back-to-back national championships, undefeated. Like they get the benefit of the doubt. Until they lose, they just get to hold that spot, even if they don't look like the number one team. That's the way I'm going.
That's just how college football works. I mean, that's how it's always works. It's like unless some team like TCU, for example, last year TCU makes the championship game. They unload everybody, including their quarterback, including all their best playmakers. Okay, they maybe don't get the benefit of the doubt. Plus, they had kind of that fluky run. But if you're USC back in the day when they had Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush, if you're Texas for their run there for a little bit, if you're Alabama, you get the benefit of the doubt. And who's earned it more than Georgia over the last 2 years?
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, again, until they lose, I mean, you have to kind of keep them up at the top spot. But certainly there have been other teams that have looked more impressive than Georgia this year, and maybe don't look as flawed as Georgia does right now. So maybe Kirby Smart will figure it out, but I don't know. I mean, you don't want to go into this game with so many question marks because I think Kentucky is pretty strong this year.
They are. Brock Bowers bailed them out twice last week.
Yep.
It feels like we've still yet to have the big one, right? Like the big upset in college football. I mean, like Florida State LSU was a big result. Texas beating Alabama was very big, but not like shocking. It feels like we're inching closer. Like something you just know a domino is going to fall, because right now there are a ton of teams at the top, and I just wonder who that first one is going to be. Maybe we will be discussing it the next time we talk. That will be Sunday after Michigan plays Minnesota. And I will actually still be in Minnesota where I'm staying. This is a good time to talk about it briefly. I'm staying in Minnesota for Big Ten basketball media day. Hello, basketball season's here. And yes, we're going to certainly keep the emphasis on Michigan football, as we should, the number 2 team in the nation. But we're going to be in Minneapolis talking with Phil Martelli, who is serving as head coach while Juwan Howard recovers from heart surgery that he had in the offseason. So much to talk about with that team, depending on how we want to work it in. But there's a lot. I mean, there's just football to get to. So we're going to see how we can do that on a Sunday for Monday. Record maybe just some questions that we have going into Big Ten Media Days. That's all in the works. So I just wanted to plant that and leave that there. All right. And as always, thanks to everyone who helps make this possible. That's editor-in-chief Nicole Avery-Nichols, executive editor Anjanette Delgado. I'm sorry, Anjanette. I love you. Sports editor Kirkland Crawford, audio engineer Robin Chan, and of course, I don't know if I need to still give thanks to Andrew when he appears on the show. I mean, he always does all the work, but he's part of it. So thank you, Andrew, as well. But no, of course, I'll thank you, Andrew, because I thank you as well, Reiner.
Thank you.
So, Andrew, did you want to be thanked?
Of course. I mean, who stayed up till midnight editing that podcast on Sunday?
Yeah, well, who was at Miguel Cabrera's final game all afternoon, which is why they had to stay up. Yes or no?
That might also be me. So The fair.
Okay.
Fair.
Yeah. All right, there we go. One for the good guys. Okay. Thanks everyone for sticking around. We'll talk to you soon. Be safe. Have a good night.